about to record an episode about ChatGPT and AI in the classroom. My guests are Hazel Farrell, lecturer in music, and Pete Windle, computing lecturer. Could you write me a podcast introduction for that? Hello and welcome to The Machine, a computer science education podcast where we explore technology and related issues. I'm your host, Bertie Kelly, and today we have a very special episode for you. We're going to talk about ChatGPT and AI in the classroom. ChatGPT is a powerful natural language processing system that can generate realistic and engaging conversations with humans. AI in the classroom is the use of artificial intelligence to enhance teaching and learning outcomes. To discuss these topics, I'm joined by two guests from Waterford Institute of Technology, Hazel Farrell, a lecturer in music, and Pete Windle, a computing lecturer. Hazel and Pete have been experimenting with ChatGPT and AI in their courses, and they will share their insights and experiences with us. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of The Machine. What's wrong with this picture?
I'm guessing that was written by a certain AI generative tool, was it?
It was, yes. I've rechristened my name to be Bertie Kelly. So I asked it to write an episode, write an introduction to an episode of The Machine, and that's what it came up with.
And it also doesn't realise that we're now SETU.
No, it doesn't. No, it wasn't ChatGPT, it was Bing I asked to use it, but it obviously hasn't caught up Bing on that. So I haven't edited that at all. I said I'd just leave it as was.
And I love the way you read it in an AI voice as well. That was great.
It's a bit clunky, but thank you, Pete. Right, look, we're here to talk about, so it's myself, Rob O'Connor from Computing and Mathematics at SETU, the South East Technological University. We've Pete Windle also from the Department of Computing and Mathematics, and we've Hazel Farrell from the School of Humanities and is the programme leader in the BA Honours in Music. We're here to talk about ChatGPT, AI, those type of tools in the classroom. So first off, thank you very much for sitting in the room and chatting with us. We're also experimenting with some new gear as well. So it's an experiment in a lot of different ways. I don't want to get bogged down in what AI tools are and what ChatGPT is. I'm assuming if you're listening to this, you already know what it is. But what I'm interested in doing is exploring your use of ChatGPT as a teaching and learning tool. You both presented on this the other day to an absolutely packed room full of staff from SETU and a number online as well who couldn't fit in the room. So Hazel, we might start with yourself. You're coming at it from a music standpoint, from a humanities space. How have you used these tools in the classroom?
Okay, so I suppose what I do is, over the last few years, my research has very much been about student engagement and how to get students more actively involved in their learning. So for me, this was a logical step to take the AI into the classroom and learn with them. So the way I approached it was as a sort of a collaborative learning opportunity where we were all learning together, and I just felt that would create a deeper learning experience and make it more relevant to them. I think we're not going to be able to ignore it, and as educators, it's our responsibility to evolve when these new tools or this new technology comes along. My thinking was, I'm going to meet this one head on. I'm not going to ignore it, and I'm just going to have a very open conversation. So with our first class, I just introduced it and I said, "Who's heard of this?" and mixed, responses from different groups, and then we started to integrate it into what we were doing. Very simple example. would be we were doing an analysis project, and we were working on the minimalist style of composition. So we had brainstormed and we had created our own map of minimalist characteristics in music, and then we asked ChatGPT to do the same thing, and we put that up on the board, and then we went through each of the points and discussed to say, oh yeah, that is actually relevant, and no, that one is not too much, and we found some flaws and we found some really good things there as well, and we used that as a starting point for our conversation.
What strikes me most about this, first, is that you have jumped positively into this. A lot of people experience existential angst about tools like ChatGPT. Did you feel that at all with it? Did you feel any kind of senses we're all doomed, or did you? No,
I actually didn't, and I was I was following a lot of the dialogue online and on Twitter and things like that, and that knee-jerk thing about we're all going back to classroom exams and I'm going to stand over you while you write your answers. I just felt this is the very, very wrong thing to do, because I had been pretty deeply involved in developing new approaches to assessment and feedback, and even when we were online during COVID, it was just fantastic, the creative and innovative approaches that we had adopted. And I really sort of felt sad that, oh gosh, are we going to lose this now just for the sake of trying to catch people out, for something they may not necessarily have any intention of doing at all.
Yeah. And Pete, yourself, what has your experience been with ChatGPT as a kind of a teaching and learning tool? How have you used it thus far?
One of the earliest introductions we've had to ChatGPT was a final year project student last year using an early model of GPT-3 to write their project. And the project was really interesting. They had a PhD in English and literature, and they wanted to write a tool that generated stories with prompts and generated images from DALL-E to read to their children when they were going to bed at night.
So just the content, is this on the HDIP in computer science?
Well, it's the ICT, the HDIP is an ICT skills conversion course.
Oh, right, okay,
so we're taking people with other qualifications and bringing them into the ICT and computing forays. So this guy's background was really interesting and his idea was really interesting. So he used the ChatGPT API to send in prompts for their children's name, what sort of character, what the hero in the story was going to be, who the villain in the story was going to be. So it was a dragon for the villain, it was Harry for the child's name, it was their teddy bear for the hero. So Harry the teddy bear, and that was the prompt, and it went off and wrote a story for him and then generated an image for that story on DALL-E. DALL-E 1, I think it was at the time. So it was really interesting to see that, a year ago at this stage, being handed up, and see how far the model has come, and see how far, how much it's exploded since it was released kind of more widely and publicly in November. In November then, when it was released, we started a conversation with our students who were starting their projects this year. They were in their Internet of Things module back in November, and they were having to write a proposal for an Internet of Things project. So naturally, when we started the discussion about how it was going to impact them, they started feeding in ideas or requesting ideas for an Internet of Things project. And then it generated the entire proposal for them. So it was really interesting to see the use of it in November and getting ahead of the curve. So I think it's really important. I mean, there's a quote I saw the other day that we're in the final days of knowing whether something has been generated by a human or a machine by looking at it. And when you kind of digest that a little bit, it's quite scary, especially when you see the quality of the images that are coming out from Midjourney or Bing Images. I saw some delicious images of burgers and steak coming from both of those image generation engines. So photographers might fear a bit if they're doing commercial photography for eateries. So, we're in the final days of knowing what's been human generated in terms of content and imagery, and possibly music, seeing the experiments from David Guetta in synthesizing an Eminem style song and generating music around that. We're in those final days of knowing the difference. So,
well, I would argue we're not, but that's another day's work. It's getting to a point now where
the AI is to a point becoming indistinguishable from many things. I think to a trained eye, you'll spot those repeats, you'll spot the little bits, but I think it's a really interesting space at the minute to see where it's going to go. There's obviously ethical questions in there. There's academic integrity questions, which we've discussed here in the university and also among ourselves many times around that. So it's a really interesting space, but I think it's got huge benefits in teaching and learning. It's got huge benefits in terms of efficiencies for teachers and educators. And it's something that's going to be used in industry going forward. So we need to prepare our students for that, because I think it'd be remiss of us to send our students out into industry without the necessary skills in these tools.
Now, what I think is quite interesting about the way both of you have described it is, so Pete, you have a tech background. Hazel, you don't have a tech background, but you've both kind of jumped headlong into it. And actually, funnily enough, the person with the tech background is maybe more hesitant or negative, or has existential angst about it, perhaps. I don't know.
It's grown massively. It's something that I think a lot of students are using. I've heard of parents telling me that when their students are doing when their children are doing their coursework, they've got ChatGPT open permanently on one screen and they're doing their coursework on another screen. Usually that used to be a social media platform or Google.
Yeah. I'm just mindful that we're going down a kind of a rabbit hole, because I want to pull back to the classroom and to maybe how some of these things can be used in a positive sense, rather than getting worried about all the end is nigh and doomsayers. So Hazel, can you just maybe describe the profile of your students and then how they engaged with you in this kind of an exercise? And and please be as specific as you can about the actual use case, if you could.
Well, look, we have very mixed profile. We have some fantastic mature students that really bring another dynamic, I suppose, to our classroom, and then we have people who are straight out of school. We've got a mix of people in there, but I have to say everybody engaged with it very positively. And so some of the simple things we were doing, we used it to initiate a project on a sustainability festival we're working on, for instance. So I just threw it out there about, what sustainability means to music, or how do we apply the global sustainability development goals to music? Because, that's part of our strategy, is that these are going to be incorporated into higher education, into all of our classrooms. And, nobody really had much of an idea. And I remember somebody saying something to do with climate, So that just wasn't there. So we used ChatGPT and we asked it, how do the Sustainable Development Goals apply to music? And it gave us a whole range of ideas. And then each of those first year students could cling on to something, or they found something that resonated with them. So it stimulated their research projects for them, whether it was to do with the production of music in a sustainable way, or whether it was to do with gender equality, or, poverty of education, or whatever it was. So they were able to find really, niche areas that would work for them. And another example would be with more advanced students, my research students in fourth year, who are working on their dissertations. So what we did there was we put in their chapter titles and just asked for alternatives. And when the alternative title came up, it was really interesting, because it was saying back to them sort of, this is what you're saying in the title that you've given me. And then they were able to sort of say, oh, actually, that doesn't reflect the content of my chapter. Maybe my title was flawed in the first place, or it might have given them a more concise title, or more creative options. So they generated several each, and then they made new titles, or else they stuck with their own one. And we did other things where they could copy in, concluding comments or something, or, their deductions, I suppose. And they were asking ChatGPT if their arguments were clear. And the same thing, it came back and said, yes, I find your arguments to be clear. This is what you said. And it would change, it say it in its own words. And that was useful as well. So there's loads of nice learning experiences going on there. But I do think the important thing for me in the classroom is that the problem solving, the critiquing, the evaluating of the AI generated results comes from the students.
So what I find really interesting about that, I can imagine how that would work, because it's almost like a sounding board, essentially. Where I would be concerned about it being employed. So you're talking about final year students, they're operating at a different level, say, to first year students or second level students. And that's not a value judgment, by the way. That's just they're dealing with things at a higher level. So for the likes of information regurgitation, do you know what I mean? Like identify, blah, 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 that kind of stuff. If somebody has a background knowledge in a topic and can then use ChatGPT to reinforce what they already know or tie in other bits and bobs, but they already have a kind of an internalized set of values and data that they can match against it, so that they know if this is roughly on the right track or this is not on the right track. Where I'd be concerned is maybe if somebody doesn't already have that. So if they're in the early stages and it just spits stuff out and you just accept it as being, yeah, that's right.
You're 100% right on that. And I have found that, this is not a tool where students should be using it just to produce a load of information, because I've tried it and it's flawed. And I'm telling you that as a fact. I just did it as an experiment and it didn't sit well with me at all. I generated a full lecture presentation and I delivered it. And maybe it's just me, but I actually felt a little bit sick doing it, because I was passing something off as my own and it wasn't my own.
That's just because you're such an honest person.
No, but it didn't make me feel good, Rob. And then the other point about it was that these patterns started emerging, where there was stock phrases coming up over and over again. There was also a whole heap of nothing, where it was saying the exact same thing phrased in loads of different ways. So there was a lot of repetition, and it was just this formulaic type of approach. And the other thing that you said there is, like, if you don't have that expertise in the first place, which many of the students don't, they're not going to realise that there's stuff missing, that there's something. And it's that, and I know Pete will probably talk more about this, but with the prompts as well, what you're asking ChatGPT to do is exactly what you're going to get. So if you don't have that right prompt, as in a full contextualization and drawing on different social and cultural backgrounds and this and that, if you're not bringing that into your prompt, you're getting exactly what it says on the tin, and that's not good enough for academic writing, academic research, and even assessment answers,
So Pete, do you want to come in on that? Because you have looked into this. Prompt engineering, is that the phrase now?
Yeah, prompt engineering seems to be the phrase. And Hazel enlightened me the other day that there's a job going in the US that pays €300,000 a year. Shouldn't send on the link yet. But it's an interesting new skill. It's like anything. You put crap in, you get crap out. It's not Google. You're not asking it a question and getting a response from it, though you will get a response, and it will synthesize the results on Google and give you somewhat of a decent response. But there's a whole area of prompt engineering to get the most out of it and to increase your productivity or increase the accuracy or increase the quality of the response that you can put in. And even simple things like asking you to assume a role. You are a Python programmer, give me the configuration settings for X, Y, or Z, and it will do it. But again, one has to have the knowledge to start putting all these things together.
Yes. Now, I got into a bit of a ding-dong with somebody at your meeting the other day, which I shouldn't have done, about that, because I had tried that. I did a project last week in Python, and over the weekend, the project was over, the performance thing was finished, and I just said, I wonder what ChatGPT would do. It was Bing I've been using. Yeah. I have tried ChatGPT, but I've been trying with Bing because I'm on that now, which is still it's version 3.5 of GPT, I think it's based on, but it does have more up-to-date information, although it's still got the SETU, the Water Institute of Technology thing wrong, and Bertie Rogers, or whatever the name of the person is, who's hosting this podcast. And it did produce some nice code for me, right? But it was using some Python code. I fired it in, kind of, this is what I wanted to do. And it wasn't a million miles away from what I had written myself. But it used a different library for some sound stuff. And that library was not installed in my computer. And I asked it, how do I install this? And it gave me a command that I would have to put into a terminal thing, right? Which I know how to do. Yeah. It's not that complicated, but I know how to do that. Yeah. The one that it gave me would not work on my computer. It was pip install, but I'm using Python 3, so it would be pip 3 install. Yeah. I know that, so I can fix it. And it's a very easy fix to me. But if you don't know that, you're just sitting there with your hands up going, this isn't working for me. And that's where I suppose I'm trying to understand where that line is between the information regurgitation and the synthesis and the kind of the understanding of it all. I haven't made up my mind yet because I don't know, and I don't think I'll know for quite some time.
I intended to include a video at the end of my presentation the other day, but unfortunately PowerPoint decided that it wasn't going to play it. It was Brian O'Driscoll was dared by his fellow players many years ago to give a random quote at the end of a press conference to a question that it had no place in being the answer to. And he said that knowledge is knowing that a tomato is a fruit, wisdom is knowing not to put it in a fruit salad. And it kind of, when I was thinking about that sense of what is the intrinsic knowledge that we have and how we apply it versus the information that the generative tools give us and how it chooses to apply it. So I think it's that the human brain is still leaps and bounds ahead in terms of learning and processing information and knowing how to apply it. So knowledge is knowing that pip can install something. Wisdom is knowing that you need pip 3 because that's the way your system is configured. It's the context is missing. I'm sure if you had told that I'm using Python 3, it would say pip 3.
Oh, probably would have.
So, we know the context. It's stuff that we take for granted. But again, some of that can be engineered in with prompt engineering. And the other example that springs to mind, just kind of speaking to both your points, is that a colleague was telling me that they had an argument with a student who handed up a fantastic assignment that didn't work. It was, I think it was Python as well, actually. And the student was standing over and saying, look, the code works perfectly. I know the code is right. The code is definitely right. But it doesn't work. Yeah, but it's definitely, the code is right. Okay, explain how you got to this stage. And the lecturer basically, look, I'm not going to be angry. I'm not going to give out to you if you tell me you've used a generative writing tool. And they said, yeah, I did. Well, you forgot to tell the generative writing tool the name of your database and where it lives and the password for your database.
Yes.
So it had done everything, but because they omitted information in the prompt, it didn't give the information out in the exercise. So again, some of the problems with ChatGPT and people's negative experience with it is actually more to do with the prompt that they've entered and treating it as Google rather than providing all necessary information and generating the most accurate results.
Going back to what we were talking about a moment ago, then, if you have to bring something to the table, because if you're just looking for the right answer, you're probably asking the wrong question. If you know what I mean, like we often say in class and stuff like that, the answer isn't the best questions lead to no answers but more questions. Do you know this kind of thing? It's the question is what drives us. Actually, it's interesting that you talked about data or knowledge and wisdom. So there's a thing I teach with a first year computer science course. There's a model called the DIKY or DIKW model, which is data, information, knowledge, and wisdom. And data is 3, information is 3. Are the number of people in this room right now? It becomes 3 is just a random
context
fact, but it has no context. Information is data with context, but knowledge then is saying, well, we're talking about a podcast, and wisdom is knowing that Hazel is the smartest person in the room. So the
No,
you're looking at me now. No, but you know what I mean. But
Yeah.
so our wisdom is knowing that a tomato is not to be put in a fruit salad. Although I think that would be lovely as well.
Yes.
Vinegar.
Yes.
So computers humans are not very good at large volumes of data. We do make mistakes. We get tired. We can't process it. Even information, we can only go so far. We're quite good at knowledge, but computers are very good at data. They can do lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of data, and they can even provide meta information to the data or metadata to the data to give themselves information. But up to now, they haven't been very good at knowledge, and they're no good at wisdom. And I would say now we're getting to the knowledge stage with the computing tools through GPT and other systems like that. I don't know, you're nodding, which means you agree with me, or maybe
I
disagree
think
with
it's
me.
really important for our students to understand that because like rivers finding the simplest path to the ocean, students will find shortcuts through hard work. And I think ChatGPT and generative writing tools provide a shortcut in a way, and they think they might be fooling the lecturers. But at the end of the day, what they really want to get out of education is education and wisdom. And we need to reinforce the fact that this is a tool. It will help you find information. It'll help you crunch data. It might give you some knowledge, but we need to teach them the importance of the context, the importance of not just prompt engineering, but having all of the information available and the wisdom to be able to write the right prompt if that's the field of work they're going into, or being able to deal with a customer, because I don't think ChatGPT is going to help you deal with a real person and have a real conversation with them. It might help you write an email to them, but it's not going to have those interpersonal skills.
Yeah. I keep coming back to the quote, and the guy, Mushtaq Bilal is his name. He's a bit of a Twitter guru on, academic research, and he's really into the whole AI side of it. And he's some fantastic threads up there with brilliant training and everything available with him. But he keeps saying outsource labour, not your thinking. And that's it. It is about that efficiency Pete was talking about. It helps us with, time management. But at the same time, we still have to have the thinking, the creativity. And that's the other thing is when we're introducing AI into the classroom, we still need to instill that sense of confidence in the students that, well, actually, what I did in the first place is better than this. Or, for them to not automatically go to the default that what was produced by AI is better than what I did, because it's not.
Yeah.
May not necessarily be at all. It's a tool to help you produce something that's really good or even really creative with the AI tools for imagery and things like that. But at the same time, losing the confidence in your own ability would be a terrible thing, and as educators, I really think that we need to focus on that with our students,
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, because yourself, often with students, the big thing is to give them the confidence to trust themselves. I don't know how we're going to square that circle.
But it's about that whole collaborative thing. I mean, if you're doing it together and you're in the classroom and we're looking at results and we're discussing them, we're saying, well, really, I think what you had originally, or your original title, was actually fantastic. And, for their peers to be able to say to them this, or for me as, the educator in the room to say, listen, I think we can do it in the classroom, but yes, I get what you're saying, that, confidence is always one of those things that's difficult, with students. And just as we're speaking about confidence, I've also been thinking a lot about our colleagues and our peers who are afraid of this as well. Yeah. And even if there was a message, I suppose, that we could bring across, I think it's about just trying it out, a bit of trial and error and playing around with it yourself. And, because I could give advice that's really suited to what I do on my discipline, and the same thing with Pete and his discipline, but it may bear no relevance to what somebody else is doing somewhere else. Yeah. So it's that thing about just getting in, giving it a go, work with the students and let them know that you're learning together, because I think that humble approach is appreciated by students. The positioning yourself as I know everything and you don't, that's not a good thing in my book. So to do it together, maybe. So
I've never been in any of your classes. I've obviously seen you speak before and have been at many of your talks, and it strikes me that you are not a chalk and talk kind of an educator.
I hate it.
Yeah, I hate it as well. But
it's
I know
the wrong thing, Rob.
Yeah.
And the word lecturer,
yes,
I actually push back against all the time, because lecturing is not the right thing to do. If you're lecturing people, you are wrong.
Would I be right in saying that your classrooms are very collaborative, very dialectic? That you're just there as a facilitator rather than this deliverer of knowledge. And I always think of Mr. Gradgrind. What I want are facts, and trying to spoon them into the children's heads. Yeah. So that works in that context, that you're open to this.
Yeah.
But if you're in a different style of education, is that where maybe your difficulty? I don't know.
Yeah, and that's where other people need to adapt and say to me, well, Hazel, your approach is fantastic for what you're doing, does not work for me. This is what's going to work for me.
Even the model of delivery for higher diploma in computer science is that we essentially broadcast a class to the students. because there's a lot of information to get to.
It's an online program.
It's an fully online program, and we actually broadcast. It's one way to ensure, for a lot of different reasons. There's only maybe a quarter of the class will take the class live. Another 15% will join late and be able to play back at 1.5 speed to catch up to the live point. It's like a DVR functionality for your classes. And then 95% will use the recording and watch back either immediately after the class or at a time that suits them.
Yeah.
So we're trying to be as flexible as possible for the learner. But that takes away from that whole conversational and knowledge development kind of role. So essentially we're broadcasting information. And we have our hangback sessions afterwards, and we have lab sessions where it is more discursive. So that model doesn't lend itself, and this is what I've realised over the last few months, it doesn't lend itself very well to integrating the generative tools into how we do our classes. And while we can kind of suggest they use them for assignments or content generation or X, Y, and Z, we don't have the opportunity very often to have those conversations because the classes are very much self-paced.
Yes.
We put the content out and students absorb it. And it's been a very successful model. And it's been very good for the students, high completion rates, high job entries at the end of the course.
There's also a very high satisfaction rate amongst the students on that program as well.
When they get past the stress of doing the course,
I know people who've done the course, so, and they have all quite enjoyed it.
It is making me rethink the model in terms of broadcast. I think it's very successful for what it does, but I'm looking forward to getting back into the classroom next semester and trying out these tools in person with students and having those conversations. I love having these conversations with other facilitators about
you almost said lecture
about how they teach and how their students learn, because it's something I take away a piece of those conversations for how I can bring that into my classroom. So that's part of it for me.
So I have a first year program. It's Computer Science 101 and 102. But it's a first year program. It's basically an introduction to kind of computer systems and all that kind of stuff. So I wonder, you see, I can't see how I could use it in that context with the first year class, because the first year class is very much, right, we need to get you all to a certain level so that we can do more interesting things later on. And I don't see how I could use that yet, because to be honest with you, my role in that class is more, okay, we have lectures that are information delivery, but it's the labs are really, let's play around with some stuff. And my role really is to go around and talk to them and try and get them to try things and to discover that confidence. So I don't know how I could use it in that context.
But you know something, Rob? Like, just because something is there doesn't mean you have to use it. And I think that as well about, you remember, when we went, into the online stuff and there was all these new approaches and everything. And some people were throwing the whole kitchen sink in there. Like,
I know.
Do you know? No, but they were.
Yes.
And that was detrimental to the learning process. I always think less is more. And you know what? With that module, Rob, maybe you shouldn't be using it.
No, sorry. What I was going to say is, No, you're dead right. But a fourth year module, that is much more of a partnership, I would say. I can definitely see things at play there. But also when you're coding, they already have a base of they have a few years programming knowledge so that we can explore these tools, and maybe it comes up with a really nice way to implement something.
I think it's going to be a challenge for us in the next few years, where making sure students still have that base when they get to third or fourth year, that they haven't tried to shortcut it, and then they're left without the fundamentals or foundational elements of technology. I think it's interesting maybe in first year to start the conversation with them, make them aware of it, and I suppose to introduce, and I think this is going to be really important for higher education, to introduce a sort of a social contract about how the generative tools are used for teaching and learning and what's expected of them. And I think your principle of saying, tell me how in this assignment or this assessment, tell me how you've used ChatGPT and then what you've done yourself. So that this is an expectation that you've probably used it. Just tell me how you've used it. I don't have a problem with you using it, but I need to be able to distinguish between your work and what ChatGPT has done, or how you've used that as a foundational element you've built on it. And then there's an element of flipping the assessment as well. And instead of asking students to write on a topic that can easily be generated, ask them to generate content on that topic and critique it.
I think that's really interesting. In February, I was on an online session about ChatGPT in education. I know you were on it, Pete. I don't think you were on it. It was run by TU Dublin, And it was very, I found it useful, but at the end of it, there was a kind of a Q&A session, and there was one person came on who didn't have the camera on, was identified on the system as Dave and nothing else. So I don't know where this guy was coming from, but he basically went on a rant about the death of education, and over the last 30 years, education has been eroded and blah, 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 blah. And read between the lines, I think he thinks that the internet has destroyed minds. And maybe he's right. But I remember being so excited. I can remember those kind of early mid-90s times when the internet first came out. And when I was a postgrad student, I remember in 2002, I was doing my master's. And this would have been in the early days of e-journals. So where journals would have been available online, but not everything was available online. And I remember having to do an interlibrary loan with Trinity to get a journal. So it took weeks. It took weeks to get this journal sent down to the library in Waterford. And I read the paper and I went, oh, this isn't any use to me at all. This is no good. This isn't what I thought it was going to be at all. Oh. And it took weeks to get that. Whereas not long later, I would have been able to access that as a PDF, read it and go, okay, this suits me or this doesn't suit me. And I never did an interlibrary loan again since that. I tried to do one book and it just kept not coming.
Traumatic experience.
Yeah. Was the irony not lost on Dave that here he was on an internet platform after having a session on AI tools and probably, accessing endless amounts of journals, publications, etc. That there's some benefits maybe in the past 30 years to these advances, and maybe ChatGPT can be a next evolution in those if it's used well.
It is. I can understand where he's coming from, though. I can understand that there is this feeling that everything is changing, the sands are shifting around me, and it was better in the olden days. And maybe to some extent there is. We're going to be able to say to our children, I remember when you had to know something in your head.
Remember a phone number.
Yeah, or even phone numbers. This is a perfect example.
Very true.
But the other part of me is going, well, yeah, there is other information I should know. And if I can store a finite amount of information in my head, maybe not storing phone numbers and things like that is useful. I don't know.
Yeah, and again, it comes down to, I want to know how to make a phone call. I don't necessarily need to know the phone number, but I need to know where to look it up.
Yeah.
And it's kind of coming back to that question about open book exams and the that old method of going into an exam hall with no books, no information, and being able to regurgitate knowledge for 2 hours or not, because they don't suit some people who might be incredible in an academic environment or incredible in building a technology, but they might not be able to just regurgitate that on a piece of paper in a 2-hour exam. So I think it's about really finding a way that we can use the technology that suits our students, that suits us, and that really increases the value of the students when they go to the employment market.
And I also think training, Pete, for educators is going to be vital. Because when you said open book exam, I get a little cringe every time I hear it, just because of how badly open book exams have been used over the years, where people just took their exam hall exams and put them online and then called them an open book exam. That's just wrong. And it's the same thing now with the AI tools. If you're incorporating them in, you actually need training and you need to learn how to do this stuff, trial and error, but also attending professional development courses, things like that. So I think coming from an educator perspective as educators, is going to be vital in this.
It is. And this conversation is to be continued because, as I said, we're talking about this at the end of March 2023. Last week, Microsoft demoed their Copilot system that's going to be built into the Office suite of tools. So Copilot is already there in GitHub, which Microsoft own, which is a code repository. So you can use it there. But I've seen it. I've seen the demo. I haven't tried it. I don't think it's available to try yet. But I'll be honest with you, I love being in the classroom. I like talking to students. I like working with students. I like working on projects. But I spend a huge amount of my day working on, I call it spreadsheet work, but to be honest with you, it's bullshit work. Foosting around with spreadsheets, doing stuff. If an AI can do that for me or help me or reduce my workload in that, I don't really have a problem with that. If it's that kind of bullshit, and then I can spend my time doing something that is much more productive and I think much more valuable.
Yeah.
And I would say the same for yourself. So let's say, now this is just an example, Hazel, you can tell me if I'm wrong or correct me if I'm wrong. But let's say, for example, you were doing something in music and something was in E flat and I need that transposed up to F. Right. And in the past, you would go into a program, I don't know, Finale or one of the and then you'd go around and you'd move all the notes, and it, could take you X amount of time. But it's a kind of a mechanical exercise. It's a bit kind of stupid, and it's bullshit work, really. If you could say, hey, just do that.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be great?
Yeah, I agree. And it frees up your time to be more creative and to be more productive. I absolutely agree. And I did, like when I was doing the talk, I gave the example where, I banged out an abstract, for a conference. And like, that would have taken me ages to consider every word. Now, yeah, I did have to go back and rewrite it and restructure it and do all that sort of stuff myself. But the fact that I had the bones of that there, and then, even getting the skeleton for the presentation, put in the title and say, can you suggest a presentation structure for this, and, giving you ideas as to things. Like, it really speeds up the process. And even that history lecture I was telling you about, that I'm going to totally rewrite because, just for myself, I can't live with it. But like, that took me 2.5 hours to do something that would take me a couple of weeks.
Yeah. So the idea of, and you've mentioned before, Pete, in conversations about the blank page.
Yeah.
So this is just a way of getting off the blank page.
Yeah, I always struggle to get off a blank page, and I love having conversations, bumping into colleagues and having kind of the prompted conversations to ideate and to come off that blank page, and I can go back down to my desk and kind of go bang, bang, bang. I can do a presentation in an hour. If I don't have that conversation, it could take me a week to try and come up with those ideas myself. And I think it's great as a writing prompt for ourselves to get our brains churning, because we can either agree with the points raised, ask it to give additional points or explain further, or strongly disagree with some of the things it comes up with and say, no, that's not my opinion of it, that's not how I think it should work. And it gives you, again, a focus on where you can go with it. So it's an engine to bounce stuff off of, but it's not the final product. And I think it's really important to treat anything that comes out of ChatGPT, Bing, or any other Bard now, to treat that as a prompt or treat that as a starting point. If you treat that as a finished product, not a chance. GPT 3.5, 15% of the content is considered an hallucination.
Yes.
Which is a fantastic term for it, and it is widespread now, some of the hallucinations that are out there. But
I hear where you're coming from, and I'm not suggesting that we should do away with humanity, but these are the worst versions of these tools that we're seeing now. So when we say ChatGPT, that's a kind of a catch-all for all of these AI tools, right? Yeah. We're like, even the difference between ChatGPT from November of 2022 to where we are now in March, and version 4. I haven't played with version 4. Hazel, you have been playing with it?
I have, and I'm not as impressed as I thought I would be, because people were sort of posting that, this is it, this is like, and I can deal with a hell of a lot more data, and yes, there are really sort of good answers going on there, but all of those issues I outlined earlier about the repetition, the stock phrases, the formulaic approach, and the gaps, the repetition and stuff. That's all there, like. Yeah.
I heard a great phrase about these terms on another podcast, or about these tools. They're stochastic parrots.
Okay.
And I thought that was great, because really what they will is synthesize information from elsewhere, and they can collapse it into a paragraph, which can be really useful. And I do see the value in that, but it has to get it from elsewhere. It's not thinking for itself. Not yet, anyway. I don't think so. Or if it is, it's thinking in an
questions
alien.
About is it sentient and
yeah. Well, that's, and if it, I don't want to get into that now, because that's a deeper
philosophical conversation.
Well, it is. I mean, there's a concept of the philosophical zombie. I remember reading about that. Are they zombies? I don't know, but that's a conversation for another day. But for right now in the classroom, I mean, the tools are here. They exist. You can be sure the students are going to use them. And I like Hazel's approach of being kind of open and upfront and having that dialogue. I think that's probably a very healthy way. When we try to restrict things, it never works in any aspect, really, to be honest with you. So, yeah.
When I was in college, you mentioned about the e-journals. Wikipedia was the new thing when I started, when I was in college, and it was the ruination of education and, academics were very worried about what was being posted up because you couldn't reference it from Wikipedia because it wasn't seen as quality. And yeah, they were right. The information up there, unless it's referenced in itself and you go back to the reference or the original version of it. But that was the worry back then. I think there's the same worries now, but I still think it's a starting point. It can make us more efficient, but there still needs to be a human in the loop on it. You can't just take what it says as gospel. And then there's another philosophical or fundamental question about some of those hallucinations where it makes up a quote from, I've seen it from Garrison or Rovey about online communities. And are these quotations now going to get inserted into the kind of circular literature, and now people are going to be quoting hallucinations going forward. So it's all sorts of fun stuff and fun conversations it opens up.
Hazel, you mentioned the person on Twitter. I can't remember their
Mustache
name.
Bilal.
Mustache Bilal. Okay, yeah. And would you recommend? Is there basically right? I want to wrap this up. Where would you recommend somebody go to learn more about this?
I have been using Twitter a lot because there's a huge...
It's still working for now.
No, there's a huge dialogue, and there's actually a community up there. And every day, you'll find people there posting their presentations up there. They're posting ebooks, all documents they're after developing and things like that. And it's really good for learning. But also, I think when people know you're interested in something, they send you stuff. So I get lots of emails where random people are saying, I found this article, I think you'd really like it. And I'm collecting them all together, and I need to that's one of my jobs for this weekend, is to actually gather them, together. But I think get involved in the conversation. Mine is predominantly through Twitter and through colleagues at the moment.
You're, am I right, Wrenchy Girl on Twitter, is that right?
I am. That's my jiu-jitsu reference, you see, because that's my jiu-jitsu title, and people are like, what is this about? Yes, but yeah, I'm a Wrenchy Girl on Twitter, and yeah, there's a lot of conversation going on there.
And Pete, where would you recommend people?
Yeah, I've stayed away from Twitter purposely for the last few years because I started doom scrolling on Twitter in the early days and lost days, weeks, years of my life. So I've actually made a conscious decision to step away from it. But stupidly and ironically, I'm still on Facebook. And there's ChatGPT Insights is a Facebook page. ChatGPT Experts is another Facebook page that publish really good content that is domain specific. So pro tips for content marketers, pro tips for data engineers, pro tips for, and it's really about that prompt engineering.
Yeah. There's
also cheat sheets there in terms of prompt engineering. So I think the prompt engineering is going to be the prominent skill coming out of this for the next few years. And what's interesting is you can use the generative writing tools to write prompts for other generative tools. So ChatGPT 4 for Midjourney, etc. So it's interesting to see how meta it's all getting.
Yeah, the snake that eats itself.
Yeah, so it's interesting to see those groups on Facebook. So whether you're on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, there's some great resources and groups on that. So once you start getting interested in these things, the machine, the algorithms will start feeding you more content like it.
Exactly.
And you'll end up seeing these groups more, you'll end up seeing that content more.
Well, Pete and Hazel, thank you so much for your time today. Thanks for sharing your wisdom on the topic. He said if you want to find out more about the folks, look for them online. I'll put some notes in the description for the podcast. I've been Bertie Kelly, a Bing hallucination. I've been Rob O'Connor. If you want to find out more about the podcast, at @machine_podcast on Twitter. Bit of stuff up elsewhere, but you can do an old search for us. And and if you do find Bertie Kelly, tell him I want my job back.
Thanks, Rod.
Thanks, Rod.